Stereolab are an alternative music band formed in 1990 in London, England. The band originally comprised songwriting team Tim Gane and Lætitia Sadier, both of whom remained at the helm across many lineup changes. Other long-time members include Mary Hansen, who played with the group from 1992 until her accidental death in 2002, and Andy Ramsay, who joined in 1993, and who is still in the official lineup. Called one of the most fiercely independent and original groups of the 90s, Stereolab were one of the first bands to be termed post-rock. Their primary musical influence was 1970s krautrock, which they combined with lounge, 1960s pop, and experimental pop music. They were noted for their heavy use of vintage electronic keyboards, and their sound often overlays a repetitive motorik beat with female vocals sung in English or French. Stereolab often incorporates socio-political themes into their lyrics. Some critics say the group's lyrics carry a strong Marxist message, and both Gane and Sadier admit to being influenced by the Surrealist and Situationist cultural and political movements. Gane is skeptical of labels such as Marxist pop, and defends the band against accusations of sloganeering. Although many of the band's albums have been underground hits, they never found larger commercial success. The band were released from their recording contract with Warner Bros. Records when Warner's imprint Elektra Records folded. The release was reportedly due to poor record sales, and since then Stereolab's self-owned label, Duophonic Records, has signed a distribution deal with 2 Pure. Duophonic holds the copyrights to the band's recordings, and on this label the band has released many limited edition records. In 2009, Stereolab announced via their website that they were going on indefinite hiatus. History, 1990 – 1993. In 1985, Tim Gane formed McCarthy, a band from Essex, England known for their left-wing politics. Gane met the French-born Lætitia Sadier at a McCarthy concert in Paris and the two quickly fell in love. The musically inclined Sadier was disillusioned with the rock scene in France and soon moved to London to be with Gane and pursue her career. In 1990, after 3 albums, McCarthy broke up and Gane immediately formed Stereolab with Sadier and ex-Chills bassist Martin Keane. The group's name was taken from a division of Vanguard Records demonstrating hi-fi effects. Gane and Sadier, along with future Stereolab manager Martin Pike, created a record label called Duophonic Super 45s which, along with later offshoot Duophonic Ultra High Frequency discs, would become commonly known as Duophonic. The 10-inch vinyl EP Super 45 was the first release for both band and label, and was sold through mail order and the Rough Trade shop in London. Super 45's band-designed album art and packaging was the first of many customized and limited edition Duophonic records. In a 1996 interview in The Wire, Gane calls the do-it-yourself aesthetic behind Duophonic empowering, and says that by releasing one's own music you learn. It creates more music, more ideas. Other independent bands such as Tortoise, Broadcast, and La Bradford would also release material on Duophonic. Stereolab followed up with another EP, Super Electric, and a single, Stunning debut album. The band's early material was rock and guitar-oriented. Of Super Electric, Jason Ankney wrote in Allmusic that droning guitars, skeletal rhythms, and pop hooks are not vintage synths and pointillist melodies were their calling cards. In 1992, Stereolab's first full-length album, Peng, and first compilation, Switched On, were released on independent label 2 Pure. Around this time, the lineup consisted of Gane and Sadier plus vocalist Mary Hansen, drummer Andy Ramsay, bassist Duncan Brown, keyboardist Catherine Gifford, and guitarist Sean O'Gon of the 1980s famed micro-Disney duo. Hansen, an Australian, had been in touch with Gane since his McCarthy days. After joining, she and Sadier developed a style of vocal counterpoint that distinguished Stereolab's sound until Hansen's death 10 years later in 2002. O'Gon would later leave to form the High Llamas, but would frequently return to contribute to Stereolab's records. Beginning with their 1993 EP Space Age Bachelor Pad Music, the band began to incorporate easy listening elements into their sound. This release raised Stereolab's profile and landed them a major label American record deal with Elektra Records. Their next album, 1993's Transient Random Noise Bursts with Announcements, was their first American release under Elektra, and became an underground hit in both the US and the UK. Mark Jenkins commented in The Washington Post that with this album, Stereolab continues the glorious drones of their indie work, giving celestial sweep to their garage rock organ pumping and rhythm guitar strumming. In the UK, it was released on Duophonic Ultra High Frequency discs, which is responsible for domestic releases of Stereolab's major albums. The year would also see a collaboration with industrial stalwarts Nurse with Wound, in the form of the krautrock EP. 1994 2001, on January 8, 1994, Stereolab achieved their first chart entry when 1993 EP Jenny Ondialen entered at number 75 on the UK singles chart. With their 1994 album, Mars Audiac Quintet, Stereolab focused more on pop and less on rock, resulting in what Allmusic described as, what may be the group's most accessible, tightly written album. Mars Audiac Quintet makes heavy use of vintage electronic instruments, and also contains the single Ping Pong, which gained press coverage for its allegedly explicitly Marxist lyrics. After releasing a 1995 collection of singles and B-sides called Refried Ectoplasm, Switched On, Volume 2, Stereolab followed with an EP titled Music for the Amorphous Body Study Center. This EP was their musical contribution to an interactive art exhibit put on in collaboration with New York City artist Charles Long. Stereolab's 1996 album, Emperor Tomato Ketchup, was a critical success and was played heavily on college radio. A record that captivated alternative rock, it represented Stereolab's high watermark according to music journalists Tom Moon and Joshua Klein, respectively. Krautrock techniques were still present, but the band stirred the pot with hip-hop sounds and complex instrumental arrangements. Stéphane David of French newspaper Le Monde claimed to see musical influences as diverse as the Velvet Underground, Burt Bacharach, and Section Noise Hardy on the album. John McEntire of the band Tortoise assisted with production and played on Emperor Tomato Ketchup. Catherine Gifford was replaced by Morgan Holt before recording, and bassist Duncan Brown by Richard Harrison after. Also in 1996, Stereolab collaborated with Herbie Mann on the song One Note Samba Surfboard for the AIDS benefit album Red Hot Plus Rio produced by the Red Hot organization. Dots and Loops was released in 1997, and was Stereolab's first album to enter the Billboard 200 charts, peaking at number 111. Barney Hoskins wrote in Rolling Stone that with it the group moved ever further away from the one-chord Velvet's drone mesh of its early days toward easy listening and Europop. A review in German newspaper Die Zeit echoed this observation, claiming that in Dots and Loops Stereolab transformed the harder Velvet Underground-like riffs of previous releases into softer sounds and noisy playfulness. Contributors to the album once again included John McEntire, along with Sean Oregon of the High Lammers and Jan St. Werner of German electropop duo Mouse on Mars. A second Nurse with Wound collaboration, Simple Headphone Mind, appeared in 1997, and the third installment of the Switched On series, Aluminum Tunes, followed in 1998. In 1998, Stereolab collaborated with French avant-garde singer and poet Brigitte Fontaine in single Calamero. The band took a break from touring while Gane and Sadier had a child. In 1999, Stereolab's next album appeared, titled Cobra and Phases Group Play Voltage in the Milky Night. Co-produced by McEntire and American producer Jim Erck, the album earned mixed reviews for its lighter sound, and peaked at number 154 on the Billboard 200. An unsigned NME review said that this record has far more in common with bad jazz and progressive rock than any experimental art rock tradition. In a 1999 The Washington Post article, Mark Jenkins asked Gane about the album's apparent lack of guitars. Gane responded, "There's a lot less upfront, distorted guitar. But it's still quite guitar-based music. Every single track has a guitar on it." Stereolab added a new bassist, Simon Johns, for the Cobra and Phases Grouper tour. The album Sound Dust followed in 2001, and rose to number 178 on the Billboard 200. Again featuring producers McIntyre and Irk, it was more warmly received than Cobra and Phase's Grouper. Critic Joshua Klein said that the emphasis this time sounds less on unfocused experimentation and more on melodia. A breezy and welcome return to form for the British band. Klein also commented that never has it been harder to discern just what Sadier is singing, but rarely has her gibberish sounded so pleasant. 2002 2008. In 2002, as they were planning their next album, the band started building a studio north of Bordeaux, France. October saw the release of ABC Music, the Radio 1 Sessions, a compilation of BBC Radio 1 sessions. That year also marked an end to Gane and Sadier's romantic relationship. As the year was coming to a close, tragedy struck. On the 9th of December, long-standing band member Mary Hansen was killed when hit by a truck while riding her bicycle. Born in Maryborough, Queensland, Australia, Hansen earned the most attention for her vocal work with Stereolab, although she also played the guitar and keyboards. The music journalist Pierre Perron said that Hansen's playful nature and mischievous sense of humor came through in the way she approached the backing vocals she contributed to Stereolab and the distinctive harmonies she created with Sadier. For the next few months, Stereolab lay dormant as the members grieved. They eventually decided to continue. As Sadier explained in a 2004 interview, losing Mary is still incredibly painful. But it's also an opportunity to transform and move on. It's a new version. We've always had new versions, people coming in and out. That's life. In a 2004 interview, Sadier said that our dedication to her on the album, 2004's Margarine Eclipse says, "We will love you till the end, meaning of our lives. I'm not religious, but I feel Mary's energy is still around somewhere. It didn't just disappear." The 2003 EP Instant Zero in the Universe was recorded in France, and was Stereolab's first release following Hansen's death. According to music journalist Jim de Rigotis, the EP marked a return to their earlier, harder sound, free from the pseudo-funk moves and avant-garde tinkering that had been inspired by Chicago producer Jim Irk. That year, Sadier's side project, Monade, released its debut album Socialisme Barbare, The Bedroom Recordings. Both the name of the group and the title of the album are references to the work of Greek-French intellectual Cornelius Castoriadis. The album Margarine Eclipse followed in 2004 with generally positive reviews, and peaked at number 174 on the US Billboard 200. The track Feel and Triple was written in tribute to Hansen. According to Sadier, I was reflecting on my years with Hera. Reflecting on how we sometimes found it hard to express the love we had for one another. The Observer's Molloy Woodcraft awarded the album 4 out of 5 stars, and described Sadier's vocal performance as life and love affirming, and the record as a whole as complex and catchy, bold and beatific. Kayla Fassini argued in Rolling Stone that Margarine Eclipse was full of familiar noises and aimless melodies. Margarine Eclipse was Stereolab's last record to be released on American label Elektra Records, which shut down that same year. Future material would be released on 2 Pure, the same label which had released some of the band's earliest material. Margarine Eclipse was followed by Assailants from the Anti-Sun, a 2005 3 CD and 1 DVD retrospective of the group's rarer material. Monade's second album, A Few Steps More, also appeared that year. In 2005 and 2006, Stereolab released 6 limited edition singles which were later released as a collection in Fab Four Suture, and contained material which Mark Jenkins thought continued the brisker sound of the band's post-Hansen work. Serene Velocity, a best-of compilation focusing on the band's Elektra years, was released in late 2006. By June 2007, Stereolab's lineup comprised Tim Gane, Lætitia Sadier, Andy Ramsay, Simon Johns, Dominic Jeffrey, Joseph Watson, and Joseph Walters. The band had finished the production of their next album, entitled Chemical Chords, which was released in August 2008 on the 4AD label. The release of the album was followed by an autumn tour of Europe and the United States. 2009 a present, they toured Australia in February 2009 as part of the St. Jerome's Laneway Festival. In April the same year, manager Martin Pike announced a pause in the band's career together for the time being. After 19 years, he said that they felt it was time to take a rest and move on to new projects. In November 2010, the band released Not Music, a collection of unreleased material recorded at the same time as Chemical Chords. At a performance on June 21, 2013 at the All Tomorrow's Parties Festival held at Pontins in Camber Sands, Cavan of Antimatter were joined on stage by Lætitia Sadier for a performance of Blue Milk, thus effecting a partial Stereolab reunion. The song is mentioned repeatedly in the festival program as being highly influential on the work of festival curators Der Inter, and band member Bradford Cox also joined the group on stage for this performance. Musical style: Stereolab's music combines a droning rock sound with lounge instrumentals, overlaid with sing-song female vocals and pop melodies. Their records are heavily influenced by the motorik technique of 1970s krautrock groups such as New and Faust. Tim Gane has supported the comparison. New did minimalism and drones, but in a very pop way. Stereolab style also incorporates easy listening music of the 1950s and 60s. Said Joshua Klein in the Washington Post, years before everyone else caught on, Stereolab was referencing the 1970s German bands Can and New. The Mexican lounge music master Esquivel, the decidedly unhip Burt Bacharach. The band make use of vintage analog electronic instruments such as the Farfisa and Vox organs, and the Moog synthesizer, which was featured prominently on 1994's Mars Audiac Quintet. Gane has praised these older instruments for their superior controllability. We use the older effects because they're more direct, more extreme, and they're more like plasticine, you can shape them into loads of things. Funk, jazz, and Brazilian music were inspirations, and the sounds of minimalist composers Philip Glass and Steve Reich can be found on 1999's Cobra and Phases Grouper. Several critics have commented that the band's later work, like Instant Zero and The Universe and Margarine Eclipse, sounds similar to their guitar-driven earlier style. Lætitia Sadier's French and English vocals have been a part of Stereolab's sound since the beginning. She writes the group's lyrics, which tend to lean towards Marxist social commentary rather than affairs of the heart. In reference to Sadier's laid-back delivery, Peter Shapiro wrote in The Wire that she is all the emotional histrionics of 1960s German singer Nico. Sometimes Sadier will just sing wordlessly along with the music. Before Mary Hansen's death in 2002, she and Sadier would often trade vocals back and forth in a sing-song manner that has been described as eerie and hypnotic. Critic Jim Harrington commented that Hansen's absence is noticeable on live performances of Stereolab's older tracks, and that their newer songs could have benefited from her backing vocals. In interviews, Gane and Sadier have discussed their musical philosophy. According to Gane, to be unique was more important than to be good. On the subject of being too obscure, he said in a 1996 interview that maybe the area where we're on dodgy ground is this idea that you need great knowledge of esoteric music to understand what we're doing. Sadier responded to Gane, saying that she thinks, we have achieved a music that will make sense to a lot of people whether they know about Steve Reich or not. The duo were upfront about their desire to grow the group sound. For Gane, otherwise it just sounds like what other people are doing, and for Sadier, you trust that there is more and that it can be done more interesting. On stage, Stereolab toured regularly to support their album releases. In a 1996 The Washington Post gig review, Mark Jenkins wrote that Stereolab started out favoring an easy listening syncopation, but eventually reverted to a messier, more urgent sound characteristic of their earlier performances. In another review, Jenkins said that the band's live songs frequently veer into a more cacophonous, guitar-dominated territory, in contrast to lighter albums like Cobra and Phases Grouper. In the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, John Bream compared the band's live sound to feedback-driven rock bands like the Velvet Underground, Sonic Youth and My Bloody Valentine. Several critics have said that Stereolab lacked stage presence, arguing that Sadier's vocal delivery was too subdued and that the band tended to play instead of perform its music. Regarding being on stage, Gane has said that I don't like to be the center of attention. I just get into the music and I'm not really aware of the people there. That's my way of getting through it. Lyrics and titles. Stereolab's music is politically and philosophically charged. Lætitia Sadier, who writes the group's lyrics, has reportedly been inspired by her anger at the Iraq War. The Surrealist and Situationist cultural and political movements were also influences, as noted by Sadier and Gane in a 1999 Salon.com interview. Stuart Mason commented in an Allmusic review that the lyrics from the 1997 song Miss Modular sound influenced by the situationist theory of the spectacle. When asked to explain her intentions in a 1991 Melody Maker interview, Sadier responded that basically I want to change the world. I want to make people think about how they live every day, shake them a bit. Critics have seen Marxist allusions in the band's lyrics, and several have gone so far as to call the band members themselves Marxist. Ping Pong, a single included on Mars Audiac Quintet, has been put forward as evidence. In the song, Sadier sings about capitalism's cruel cycles of slump and recovery with lyrics that constitute a plain-spoken explanation of one of the central tenets of Marxian economic analysis. The song opens with the lines, "It's alright 'cause the historical pattern has shown how the economical cycle tends to revolve. In a round of decades 3 stages stand out in a loop, a slump and war then peel back to square one and back for more." Band members have resisted attempts to link the group and its music to Marxism. In a 1999 interview, Gane stated that none of us are Marxists, sir. I've never even read Marx. Although Gane admitted that his partner's lyrics touch on political topics, he argued that they do not cross the line into sloganeering. Sadier herself has mentioned that she has read very little Marx. In contrast, Cornelius Castoriadis, a radical political philosopher but strong critic of Marxism, has been mentioned as a marking influence in her thinking. Her side project's name and its first album's title are also references to the work of Castoriadis. Stereolab's album and song titles occasionally reference avant-garde political groups and artists. Gane said that the title of their 1999 album Cobra and Phases group play Voltage in the Milky Night contains the names of 2 surrealist organizations, Cobra, and Phases group. The title of the first song on Dots and Loops, Brakhage, is a nod to experimental filmmaker Stan Brakhage. Other examples are the 1992 compilation Switched On, named after a 1969 Wendy Carlos album, and the 1992 single John Cage Bubble Gum, named after experimental composer John Cage. Legacy. Stereolab have been called one of the most influential alternative bands of the 90s, and one of the decade's most innovative British bands. Simon Reynolds commented in Rolling Stone that the group's earlier records form an endlessly seductive body of work that sounds always the same, always different. In The Wire, Peter Shapiro compared the band favorably to Britpop brands Oasis and Blur, and defended their music against the charge that it is nothing but the sum total of its arcane reference points. Stereolab were one of the first groups to be called post-rock in a 1996 article. Journalist Angela Lewis applied the new term to Stereolab and 3 other bands who have connections to the group. The band's 1996 album Emperor Tomato Ketchup, their high watermark according to critic Joshua Klein, was a critical success and underground hit. Stereolab have also received negative press. Barney Hoskins questioned the longevity of their music in a 1996 Mojo review, saying that their records sound more like arid experiments than music born of emotional need. In The Guardian, Dave Simpson stated, with their borrowings from early, obscure Kraftwerk and hip-obtuse sources, Stereolab sound like a band of rock critics rather than musicians. Lætitia Sadier's vocals were cited by author Stuart Cheer as often being indecipherable. A variety of artists, musical and otherwise, have collaborated with Stereolab. In 1995 the group teamed up with sculptor Charles Long for an interactive art show in New York City, for which Long provided the exhibits and Stereolab the music. They have released tracks by and toured with post-rock band Tortoise, while John McEntire of Tortoise has in turn worked on several Stereolab albums. In the 1990s Stereolab and veteran industrial band Nurse with Wound released 2 limited edition records together. Both contained Nurse with Wound remixes of original tracks provided by Stereolab. Stylistically, Music journalist J.D. Considine credits the band for anticipating and driving the late 1990s revival of vintage analog instruments among indie rock bands. Indie rock band Pavement acknowledged the group's sound on their song Half a Canyon. Stereolab alumni have also founded bands of their own. Guitarist Sean Ogan went on to form the High Llamas, while keyboardist Catherine Gifford created Snow Pony with a former member of My Bloody Valentine. Sadier herself has released 3 albums with her 4-piece side project Monade, whose sound Mark Jenkins called a little more Parisian than Stereolab's. Despite earning critical acclaim and a sizable fanbase, commercial success eluded the group. Early in their career, their 1993 EP Jenny Ondialan entered the UK singles chart, but financial issues prevented the band from printing enough records to satisfy demand. When Elektra Records was closed down by Warner Brothers Records in 2004, Stereolab was dropped along with many other artists, reportedly because of poor sales. Since then, Stereolab's self-owned label Duophonic has inked a worldwide distribution deal with independent label Too Pure. Through Duophonic the band both licenses their music and releases it directly. According to Tim Gane, we license our recordings and just give them to people, then we don't have to ask for permission if we want to use it. We just want to be in control of our own music. Artists covering Stereolab's songs have included Iron and Wine, Editors, The Ravionettes, and The Flowers of Hell. Selected discography. Stereolab released dozens of studio albums, EPs, and singles over the years. They made it a practice to make almost all of their more obscure material widely available through compilations. Studio albums, Peng. Too Pure American, Transient Random Noise Bursts with Announcements, Duophonic Elektra, Mars Audiac Quintet, Duophonic Elektra, Emperor Tomato Ketchup, Duophonic Elektra, Dots and Loops, Duophonic Elektra, Cobra and Phases Group Play Voltage in the Milky Night, Duophonic Elektra, Sound Dust, Duophonic Elektra, Margarine Eclipse, Duophonic Elektra, Chemical Chords, Duophonic/4AD, Not Music, Duophonic Drag City, Compilations, Switched On Too Pure Slumberland, Refried Ectoplasm, Switched On, Volume 2, Duophonic Drag City, Aluminum Tunes, Switched On, Volume 3, Duophonic Drag City, ABC Music, The Radio 1 Sessions, Strange Fruit Koch, Oscillons from the Anti-Sun, Duophonic Too Pure, Fab 4. Suture, Duophonic Too Pure, Serene Velocity, a Stereolab Anthology, Duophonic Rhino, Notes. References. External links, Official Stereolab website, Stereolab on MySpace, Stereolab at AllMusic.